Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope you're all doing well. So the case we are covering today truly shocked me to my core. Because back in 2020, a woman called Carol Maltese opened up an OnlyFans account, going by the name of Charlotte Angie. And Carol had been trying to find success on the internet for a while. She started Instagram, she started YouTube, but it wasn't until she turned to OnlyFans that she truly saw success. And Carol, going as Charlotte, started to attract tens of thousands of subscribers on OnlyFans. She was earning huge amounts of money from the platform every single month. She then also ventured into more extreme adult films, and apparently her films were seen by hundreds of thousands of people, until one day Carol got into a relationship with an evil man called Davide Fontana. He became her co-star, he was her business manager, he started taking a portion of her profits. And then before you know it, Carol got lured to an adult film shoot where the absolute worst happened. And how everything went down, everything about this case is just truly shocking. So that is what we are talking about today. So let's jump in. And I just want to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, and that is Cookie Jam. And have you guys heard of Cookie Jam before? They have over 100 million players, so I'm sure some of you already play this game. Let me know if you do. But Cookie Jam is the latest mobile game that I have discovered, and let me tell you, it is amazing because Cookie Jam is the ultimate match 3 puzzle game that's as sweet as it sounds. You swap, match, and crush your way through thousands of fun dessert-themed levels packed with colorful cookies, candies, and cakes. You can climb the leaderboard, join events, earn boosters, rewards, and prizes to keep you going. And if you are anything like me, you are going to love this game because it is definitely a game for all of us problem solvers out there. And given that we like true crime, I feel like problem solving, puzzles, and true crime just kind of go hand in hand. There are over 11,000 unique levels to test out your brain. You definitely have to put your thinking hat on sometimes. And the puzzles fully engage you. And I just love sitting and playing this game. It really is a game that I can completely focus on. I get completely distracted, and it is the perfect escape from the world, from everything that's just going on, and it is just so satisfying to play. I love matching up all of the cookies and progressing through the levels, and Cookie Jam is also the perfect game to play on the go because no Wi-Fi is required. There are also no time limits, which I really appreciate because I get very stressed. I do not like a time limit, and you can just pick up Cookie Jam, play it for a couple of minutes wherever you are. You can get on with some problem solving and distract your brain from whatever is going on. I always find games like this are really good when I'm feeling really anxious and I kind of just need to reset my brain. And then because there's no time limits, there's no pressure, you can just put the game down and you can return to it later on. It is also an amazing alternative to social media. Cookie Jam is completely free to play on your mobile phone and your tablet. There is always new stuff going on all of the time. And if you haven't come across this game yet, I highly recommend that you go and check it out. So put your puzzle skills to the test. Join over 100 million players today and download Cookie Jam for free by going to the link in my description box or by scanning the QR code that is on the screen. And using that link rather than going to the App Store really does help out this channel because it lets Cookie Jam know that you came from this video. So thank you again to Cookie Jam for sponsoring today's video, but thank you to every single one of you watching right now because truly without all of you guys, I wouldn't get opportunities like this. And now let's jump into today's case. Carol was born on the 23rd of September 1995, and she grew up in a place called Cesto, Calende, which is a small town in the north of Italy just outside of Milan. And Carol was born to her father Fabio and her mother Giuseppina, also known as Lily. However, when Carol was just 4 years old, her parents did get divorced. Her dad moved back to his home country of the Netherlands. He actually got remarried when he moved back to the Netherlands and had more children and kind of started a new family. And Carol didn't really see her dad that often when he moved back to the Netherlands. So her mom, Lily, raised her on her own, and she did everything to provide for her daughter. And Carol lived what has been described as a very comfortable childhood. Carol as a child was also described as just very cheerful. She was super kind. She had loads of friends. And she was a very active child as well. Like she took dance classes. She had horse riding classes. She loved reading. She was fluent in multiple languages and she just loved to travel. So that was her childhood. And now we skip forward to 2013. Carol enrolls at a local university to study fashion and design, and something very significant would happen when she was at university, because this is when she went on to meet a man who we only know as Luca. That is not his real name to protect his identity. He was 2 years older than Carol, and I believe that he was studying at the same university. That is how they met, and they quickly fell in love. They jumped headfirst into a pretty serious relationship. They did some traveling together, and then it wasn't long until Carol fell pregnant. And this was very unexpected. This was 2015. Carol was only 20 years old, and when she fell pregnant, she started to panic because she didn't feel ready to become a mom. She was literally in the middle of her university studies, and she was absolutely terrified. But after speaking to Luca, who was the father, they make the decision together that they want to keep the child and raise the child together. And that is exactly what they do. She goes on to give birth to a little boy. Carol ends up dropping out of university. She puts her dreams on hold to become a full-time mom. Carol and Luca, once they've had the baby, actually move to the town of Verona, which is where Luca's from. So all of Luca's family's there to support the young couple whilst they're adjusting to parenthood. Carol finds work at a shoe shop, and everything is just great. They are raising their son together. A few years pass. Carol and Luca's son is now 3 years old, and this is when something else very significant happens, because Carol falls for another man. She starts up an affair with a man that we only know as Simone. Again, that's not his real name. And she starts up this full-blown affair behind Luca's back. And things go on like this for a few months, where Carol is having this affair, she's sneaking around, they're staying in hotel rooms, she is messaging Simone in secret, and Luca hasn't got a clue. Until December of that year, Luca did find out about the affair. And Luca was absolutely distraught by this news. I mean, he thought that they were a solid couple. They had been together for a decent amount of time now. They were raising their son together. He thought that they were this happy little family, but that wasn't the case. And as soon as he finds out about the affair, Luca breaks off the relationship. He does not want to be with Carol anymore. So at this point, Carol doesn't actually have anywhere to live because she was living with Luca. And she was also living in Luca's home city of Verona, because obviously it's only Luca's family there. Carol didn't know anybody from this place. So Carol was forced to move back to her hometown of Cesto, Calende. And it just so happened that the man she was having an affair with, Simone, was also from the same small town. So she ends up moving in with her now new boyfriend. However, there was one problem. Simone actually lived with his parents. So Carol had to move in with her boyfriend's parents. Now, Simone's parents had one rule. They didn't want Carol's 3-year-old son to live with them. And because her son had settled into Verona, he was settled into a local nursery there, she didn't really just want to uproot her son's life. And also she had nowhere to live. So Carol had to leave her son behind in Verona with the dad, Luca, and Carol ended up moving in with her new boyfriend, Simone, and his parents. So Carol was now no longer living with her son. She was a 3-hour drive away from her son, and it was incredibly difficult for her. Just the whole process of moving was really difficult because she had to transfer to a different branch of the shoe shop that she worked at, and it was just a huge adjustment period. And then just to make matters even harder for Carol and just to make everything just so much worse, her mom, Lily, fell seriously ill. She was diagnosed with what I believe was e.l.f, also known as motor neuron disease. So Carol's mom, Lily, needed a lot of care, which Carol would help with as much as she could. So all of this was taking place at the end of 2019. So then the beginning of 2020 begins, and we all know what happened in 2020, because Carol's life, just like everybody's life, was turned completely upside down. Because in February of 2020, the COVID pandemic happened, and Carol's living in Italy, and Italy was one of the hardest countries hit by the pandemic very early on. I mean, I remember watching it on the news and it just seeming so surreal. I saw Italy go into lockdown. It was the first country, I think, to go into lockdown complete lockdown in Europe. And it was a very, very scary time for everyone. The shoe store that Carol worked at was forced to close, and Carol was instantly made redundant. She now had no income, and she had to financially rely on Simone's family, which made her incredibly uncomfortable. And because everywhere went into lockdown, she could now no longer travel to go and see her son. So Carol was really, really struggling at this point. She just felt like her life had completely come to an end, really. She was incredibly lonely. She was worried about her son. She was worried about her mom. So this is when she had almost like a light bulb moment. She felt like she wanted to completely change everything in her life, and she wanted drastic change, and she wanted a change of career. So she turned to social media, and it wouldn't be long until Carol dived headfirst into the world of OnlyFans. Because at the beginning of 2020, when the whole world is going into lockdown, this is when we saw the popularity of online platforms explode. TikTok was growing at a ridiculous rate. Even Instagram, people were seeing boosts in their followers on Instagram. YouTube was huge as well. And it's because obviously everyone was inside, had nothing to do, so people turned to social media. And Carol saw how much social media especially was exploding. She saw the potential there. She saw that it was a way to make money because she doesn't have a job right now. And she wanted to venture into becoming an influencer. So she started on Instagram. She started posting lifestyle content. She also created a YouTube channel. She was posting a lot of fashion content, which was obviously her passion. That's what she went to university for. She was posting a lot of just content like behind the scenes. However, Carol struggled to get much interaction. She didn't have the overnight success that she was clearly hoping for. However, something that Carol did notice is that a lot of people commented on her appearance. A lot of people were giving her compliments on her appearance. People were saying how attractive she was, and she started to see comments from people that were asking for more racy content. So Carol started doing just that. She started posting content where she was wearing a little bit more revealing clothing, and she found that she got a lot more interaction on those posts than just her other posts about fashion. So she decided to really kind of hone in on that. Her posts started becoming more revealing, more racy. And because her posts were doing so well, because she was getting a lot of interaction, Carol decided that she was going to make an OnlyFans account. And just like all of the other online platforms, OnlyFans saw an explosion in popularity in 2020. It grew from having approximately 10 million users to having over 200 million users, which is crazy. And Carol took advantage of this. She opened up her account. She went by the stage name Charlotte Angie. She changed all of her other social media platforms to reflect this stage name as well. And Carol, going by Charlotte, when she was posting on OnlyFans, this is when she started to post more and more explicit content. And her subscriber count on OnlyFans just continued to grow. She grew to having over 1,000 subscribers on OnlyFans pretty quickly, and it just kept growing. Thousands and thousands of followers. And she started earning a decent amount of money from the platform every single month. However, at this point, Carol had not told a single person that she had started an OnlyFans account. Not even her boyfriend, Simone, knew. Like, literally no one knew. So because Carol was earning a decent amount of money from OnlyFans, she had to keep her income secret because obviously to everybody else, she was unemployed. So she had to keep making up all of these excuses and reasons as to why she now had money. And as time went by, as Carol was posting more and more on OnlyFans, as her subscriber count grew, her followers started to demand more and more extreme content. And Carol obliged, and she began to post more and more extreme content of herself. And this is all kept a secret. And I don't know how she was filming her content because remember, we're in 2020, we're in lockdown right now, so no one's leaving the house. Like, how was she doing that? I don't know. Maybe the rest of Simone's family were like key workers or something. Maybe they were going out to work. I just don't know. But anyway, it's a secret for months and months. Nobody knows. But then at some point in 2020, this is when someone close to the family discovers Carol's OnlyFans account. And they immediately told Carol's boyfriend Simone about her account. Simone's parents then found out, and obviously Carol is living with Simone's parents, and Simone's parents were horrified. They were a very conservative family. They didn't like the idea of Carol doing this. They also didn't like the idea of her filming content under their roof. But Carol continued on with her OnlyFans account even though she was getting judged for it. Her boyfriend Simone seemed to be okay with her new career, but by the time we get to October of 2020, this is when something else very significant happens. Because Carol meets a man by the name of Davide Fontana, and things quickly go downhill from here. So Davide was 42 years old. He was a banker. He had a wife who he had been married to for years. He was also a wannabe influencer blogger. He had an Instagram account with over 10,000 followers, which is quite a lot, and he would post images of food. He also had his own website, which he has described as a fashion and food blog, and on the website he has a page about himself where he has described himself as, quote, an atypical Aries, calm and rational but stubborn and determined. It is said that he also had a passion for technology and photography. There was another thing that Davide was quite interested in, and in his words he has said, quote, beautiful women. And behind his wife's back, his wife didn't have a clue about this, Davide actually had a hobby, and that is that he was a nude photographist. So he would set up shoots with women and he would photograph them either in their lingerie, or quite often they would have no clothes on. But then Davide would sleep with the women after the photo shoot. So he was repeatedly cheating on his wife, and his wife didn't have any clue that this was going on. So in October of 2020, Carol, posing as Charlotte Angie, her OnlyFans name, said that she was looking for a photographer. And guess who got in touch? It was Davide. They arranged for this photo shoot to happen. They go to a hotel room, the photo shoot happens and everything. But when the shoot is done, this is when Davide decides to offer Carol money to have sex. So maybe that is what he was doing all along. Not that that makes it okay, like, because he's having multiple affairs behind his wife's back, but maybe that is what he was doing to begin with. Maybe he's always been offering money for sex. And I'm like, wow, he is bold just to straight up offer money for sex. But Carol agrees. She accepts the money. They have sex. And it's like, Carol, do you not remember that you're also in a relationship? So Carol is now cheating on her boyfriend Simone. It's like people are just cheating on each other left, right, and center in today's case. So then this strange relationship between Carol and Davide carries on for a few months where they meet up, they have a photo shoot, but then Davide pays for sex from Carol, like after the shoot. And as time went on, this is when Davide started to develop strong feelings for Carol. He actually had romantic feelings. It wasn't just attraction anymore. Because in January of 2021, this is when Davide sent Carol a message that said, quote, from now on, I will no longer be your client. It is very important to me. I want to be more than that. And we don't know how Carol felt about this. Like, did she also have feelings for Davide? She's obviously still with her boyfriend, Simone. Davide is also still with his wife. It's just all very, very messy. But Davide wanted an actual relationship with Carol. He didn't want to pay for sex anymore. He wanted it to mean something to Carol as well. But in February of 2021, just a month later, everything comes to a head because Simone actually finds out that Carol is basically cheating on him with this Davide. So the relationship between Carol and Simone breaks down. After this, Carol then decides to enter into a full-on relationship with Davide. And then pretty much after that happens, Davide makes the decision to come clean to his wife about the affair that he's having with Carol and the fact that he wants a divorce from his wife and he wants to be with Carol full time. And it gives me a headache, this case. There's just too many people switching relationships. It's very confusing. It's very messy. So Carol and Davide are now in a relationship together. They also move in together. And this is sadly all building to the terrible events of today's case. So now that Davide and Carol are together, it wasn't long until Davide started starring in Carol's OnlyFans content. The two of them would film sex scenes together in their apartment. This was getting a lot of attention from Carol's followers. And because she was getting a lot of interaction, she was getting more followers, so then she would post more sex scenes of herself and Davide, and it kind of became like a joint OnlyFans account really, because a lot of Carol's content did include Davide from this moment. time went on, so they basically were business partners. And the OnlyFans account just continues to grow and grow. It's obviously making more and more money. And Carol's profile started to grow so much that she started to get recognized in public, which Davide did not like at all. Oh no. He was insanely jealous. Carol now had over 30,000 followers on Instagram. She also had a lot of paid subscribers on OnlyFans, and it is said that she was making 10,000 euros a month. So Davide, he was insanely possessive of Carol. He didn't like that she was getting attention and he wasn't. He wanted Carol all to himself. But Carol didn't want this. She didn't want to be in a relationship with someone who was controlling or possessive. So Carol approached Davide about having an open relationship, and this is what the couple agreed to. And then, because they're now in an open relationship, it wasn't long until Carol's ex-boyfriend Simone comes back into the picture, and Carol and Simone are somewhat seeing each other again. Again, so messy, because Simone would turn up at the apartment that now Carol and Davide are living at. I have no idea if they actually were having a sexual relationship again, but Davide didn't like this at all. Oh no. Because this was Carol's ex. This was someone that she probably had been in love with. There was real feelings there between the two, and Davide did not like that. No, because he wanted Carol all to himself, even though he has literally agreed to have an open relationship. So what did he expect? And one day when Simone's car is parked outside of the apartment, all of his tires got slashed and nobody knew who did it. And I'm like, I wonder. It has never been proven that it was Davide, but I think I can guarantee you it was, because who else is going to slash all of his tires other than the jealous kind of boyfriend? And now we move on to another very specific thing. Now, because Carol's OnlyFans account had really been growing in popularity and was getting a lot of attention, Carol started to be approached by the adult film industry. She had been contacted by multiple adult film directors for her to film in their video shoots. They saw Carol as a potential star and they offered her a load of money, and Carol was very interested in this. And this is the moment that Carol, as Charlotte Angie, became a porn star. And she started to make appearances in various different pornographic films. And she was filming a lot of sex scenes with other men. Now you would think Davide, being insanely possessive and controlling, would be very jealous of this, because previously he had been her only co-star. And now she had many different co-stars. But Davide didn't actually mind this at all. No. He just saw the money that she was making, and he was getting a cut of all of the profits that she was making. So he didn't mind that at all. And Carol's content was becoming more and more extreme. With that, her audience grew and grew. And apparently hundreds of thousands of people were watching her pornographic films. She also started to film video shoots all over the world. She was working with many different studios, and she was just making a lot of money. She also started to do live performances in strip clubs across Italy. She would be booked up for various different events. She did exotic festivals. Like, she was booked and busy. And her profile became so big that she started to make appearances on radio shows in Italy.
Esther, che si chiama Charlotte Angie. Buonasera signora Angie, come sta?
Buonasera, bene, mi sentite?
Che fa? Sospira, già sospira la signora Charlotte Angie.
She talked a lot about her career as a porn star, how she started on OnlyFans, and she wanted to break the stigma that was attached to her industry. She also made a video on Facebook where she said, quote, "There's so much lack of representation among us women. Other moms always judge you if you make different choices, like posting provocative photos. They make you feel like less of a mom." Carol also said that she didn't plan to stay in the adult industry for forever. She said that she was only doing it so she could raise funds so she could move and be closer to her son, who was still living in Verona. And she just wanted to be able to support herself and support her son financially. So Carol continues on with her career. We now get to September of 2021. Carol has been making adult content now for approximately 18 months. And now we get to the next significant thing that happens in today's case. Because Carol meets another man called Salvatore Galdo. Now, Salvatore was in the adult industry himself. Apparently, he was quite well known in the world of hardcore, and Carol and Salvatore started filming videos together. And Davide had no problem with this. He had no problem with anybody that she worked with because he was making all that money. But at some point behind Davide's back, Carol and Salvatore actually start up a relationship. Now, it's not really behind Davide's back because they're supposed to be in an open relationship, but I think why it is behind Davide's back is because Carol didn't tell him. So even though they are in an open relationship, she's keeping it secret. So Carol and Salvatore, they start to develop romantic feelings for one another, and things move very, very quickly. They now start a full-on relationship. They're going on dates. They are basically boyfriend and girlfriend. And then before you know it, Salvatore proposes. Carol immediately accepts because she is head over heels for Salvatore. So then she has to tell Davide that she's no longer in this open relationship with him. She has to tell him that she's now in a new relationship. She's actually engaged to this man, Salvatore. And surprisingly, Davide took the news very well. Or did he? He tells Carol that he is fine with her decision. He just wants her to be happy, but he still wants to be friends and business partners because, you know, of course, he still wants all of that money. And Carol is like, yes, that's exactly what I want. I still want to work with you. We're still friends. We'll still be close, but we're just not together. Davide and Carol actually still film content together. They had many films and shoots already planned, and they still wanted to go ahead with those video shoots even though they were no longer together. And Carol was just thinking, this has gone perfectly. This has gone better than I thought. Because Davide, he's possessive, he's controlling. I can imagine she was worried about how he was going to take this news, but he seems to have taking it perfectly. It's not awkward or uncomfortable at all. Carol is now in this loving relationship with Salvatore, and she discusses with Salvatore that she eventually wants to move back to Verona to be closer to her now 5-year-old son. But because she will be moving back to Verona, this also means that her business relationship with Davide will have to end. So Carol has to break that news to Davide as well, that he will no longer be working with her, essentially cutting off all of his money. But again, Davide takes that news very well. He makes out to Carol that he just wants what's best for her and that he will fully support her in whatever her decisions are. However, what Carol didn't realise is that Davide didn't actually take any of this news well at all. He was secretly fuming and he wanted revenge. And this is now when we get to the terrible events of today's case. Because after Davide heard the news that Carol was, one, leaving him for another man, but then moving to a different city and he was no longer going to make money from her, he was angry. He started to think, hold on a minute. This woman has completely used me. Yes, Davide felt like he was the one used and abused, which doesn't really make sense because Carol was making most of the content, and obviously she was making content before she even met Davide. But then Davide was the one profiting from her content, but he was the one used. Doesn't make sense, does it? And because he was the one that felt used and abused, he felt like the whole thing was unfair. He wanted revenge. And how was Davide going to carry out his revenge? Well, he wanted to lure Carol into a vulnerable position, and then he wanted to carry out a very vicious and brutal attack on her. And Davide had the perfect idea of how he was going to carry this out. Because it turns out over the last few months, Carol had been taking requests from her subscribers on OnlyFans. So subscribers would put in a request for like a certain video, and then Carol would create that content for that subscriber. And she was doing all sorts of things for her subscribers. She was dressing in certain outfits. She was saying certain dialogue. She was doing role play. She was playing out certain fantasies. And Carol was really happy to do this because she was making a lot of money doing all of these requests. So Davide had an idea. He decided to make up a fake OnlyFans account. He became a subscriber of Carol's and he put in a request for one of these private custom videos. And his request was that he wanted Carol to essentially be tortured. He He made out as if that was his thing, like that was what got him going. And this fake profile, obviously Carol didn't realize it was a fake profile. They had very specific requests. They wanted Carol tied to a stripper pole. They wanted her to be gagged. And they also wanted a trash bag over her head so she couldn't see anything. But then this subscriber also had another request, and that was that Davide, her co-star in some of her content, would also star in the personal requested video as the one torturing Carol. Now, of course, this torture wasn't supposed to be real. It was supposed to just be role play. But the request also asked if Carol could use a real knife to make it feel more realistic. And the request wanted this real knife to be held to Carol's throat. And this is pretty extreme. This was more extreme than anything Carol had done before. Yes, she had done other violent things, other role play that was a little bit more questionable, but nothing this extreme. But this fake profile was offering to pay her a lot of money. So Carol thought, well, it's just role play. It's not real. What harm could it be? And it was a lot of money, so she accepted the request. Carol then approached Davide about this request because obviously it had been requested that he co-star in the content, and Davide was like, oh yeah, sounds great, I'll do it. And Carol obviously didn't realize that it was Davide that was the fake profile that had requested this video in the first place. So Davide was over the moon with this because he thought that he had successfully lured Carol into his trap. So it is now January of 2022. Carol and Davide had planned to film this new content, this request, on the 11th of January 2022. And in the meantime, in the days leading up to this, Davide got to work on putting his plan in motion. He first goes to Amazon, where he buys a metal saw and an axe. Even more concerning, he also buys a fire pit and a deep freezer. So after Davide had bought all of these items, we now get to the 11th of January 2022, which is when the terrible events of today's case take place. Because on this day, it turns out that Carol and Davide also had other content to film together because they were co-stars in a lot of Carol's content. So it wasn't just this personal request that they had to film. And I'm not actually 100% sure on what Carol's living situation is at this point, because obviously she was living with Davide, but that was when they were in that open relationship, and obviously now she's engaged to another man. So I'm not exactly sure on how her living situation is. From what I could gather, it kind of seems like she is living between Davide's home and Salvatore's home. She's kind of going back and forth, but I can't be 100% certain on that. So Carol is at Davide's home at this point. Davide has set up the bedroom that they always filmed in, like the lights and the cameras and stuff. And once everything was set up, the two of them went about filming the multiple sex scenes that they needed to film that day. They started with the content that they needed to film just for the OnlyFans account, but then they finally needed to film that personal video request from that fake profile. So Carol at this point just goes through all of the things that have been requested to appear in the video. I mean, she believed that it was a genuine subscriber that had requested this video. So Carol allowed Davide to tie her to a stripper's pole that had been set up in the bedroom. Her wrists and her ankles were both bound with duct tape. Davide then places a gag in Carol's mouth. He then places a black plastic bag over her head. And obviously Carol just thinks that this is the video, this is role play, so she's not suspicious of anything at this point. So Carol is now completely restrained. She can't make a noise, she can't see anything. She is at the complete mercy of Davide. And this is when he pulls out a hammer and he starts hitting her with it. Now at first he wasn't hitting her too hard. At first it kind of was just role play. So Carol again wasn't suspicious because Davide is just pretending that this is all part of the explicit content that has been created. Carol goes along with it. I think Carol was expecting to be hit gently with various objects because obviously at the end of the day this was supposed to be a torture video and Davide isn't really being violent right now. But then suddenly, out of nowhere, Carol barely even had a chance to react. Davide launches into a brutal and vicious attack. His hammer blows become harder and harder. It was very clear that this was no longer role play. He is hitting Carol all over her body using his full force. He immediately starts to cause serious injuries to Carol. I can't even imagine what must have been going through her head in that particular moment. And the worst thing about all of this is that she can't get away. She is tied to a stripper's pole. Her wrists and her ankles are bound. She can't even make a noise. There is a gag in her mouth, and she also can't see anything. This must have been incredibly terrifying for her. As well, she must have known that it was Davide that was causing these injuries. Someone that she trusted. She worked with him. She was basically in a relationship with him. She lived with him. And now he has turned on her. But Davide kept going. He kept striking her with this hammer until one final time he raised that hammer and he struck Carol on the head as hard as he possibly could. And Carol had blacked out at this point. She was completely unconscious and Davide wasn't even sure if she was still alive. But just to make sure that he finished what he set out to do, this is when Davide pulled out the knife, the real knife that was supposed to be used in the content that they were filming. And horrifically, he now uses this knife and he slits Carol's throat. And tragically, this is the moment when 26-year-old Carol Maltese lost her life, which is just truly heartbreaking. The fact that Davide lured her and she willingly let herself be tied up and gagged, that is just so sadistic that he got her willingly to be in such a vulnerable position. And that just shows you the level of trust that Carol had in Davide. The fact that she allowed herself to be tied up, gagged, and a plastic bag over her head. You would have to really trust somebody to put yourself in a position like that. And then for him to just turn on her like that, just because she was moving on with her life. The fact that she was moving back to a city to be close to her son and he couldn't take it because he's so possessive and controlling. And after this brutal murder, what did Davide do next? Well, he actually just sat and stared at Carol's body for 30 minutes. And I don't know why he did this. Was he coming to terms with what he has done? Was he trying to figure out a plan? Was he happy with what he's just done? We don't know. But then after sitting there for 30 minutes staring at Carol's dead body, he got up and he turned the camera off. Because yeah, don't forget, they were filming sex scenes together. That camera was on and rolling. And obviously the camera was still recording because Carol thought that she was filming that video request and it needed to be realistic. But what is crazy is that whole murder had just been recorded. But Davide, he got up, he turned the camera off, and he did delete the footage. But as we know, even if you delete footage, it never really goes away. Then Davide retrieves the rest of the items that he bought from Amazon. And this is when he uses the axe and the metal saw that he purchased to dismember Carol's body. And he spent hours doing this. He dismembered Carol's body into 15 pieces. He then tried to burn each separate piece in the fire pit that he had purchased from Amazon. But that was proving not to be successful. So instead, he actually just bagged up the 15 separate pieces and put all of those pieces of Carol's body in the deep freezer that he had also purchased. And then he just left those body parts in the freezer, and then he got to work cleaning up the crime scene. He tidied up the home, he washed his clothes, he tried to remove all traces of what had just happened, and he was truly hoping that he had gotten away with the perfect murder. And I don't know why people think that. Like, do people really think that they are going to get away with murder, especially in today's world? Especially because Carol had a public profile. She also had a fiance. She was a mother. She had people that would notice if she was missing. However, Davide also had a plan to fix that as well. Because was Davide going to wait for the people in Carol's life to just notice that she was missing? Oh, no. He wanted to take things one step further. And this just makes this case even more sick and twisted because now Davide pretends to be Carol. Yeah, you heard that right. Davide had access to Carol's phone and he starts messaging all of Carol's family and friends, telling them all that she had caught COVID and she was self-isolating so she wouldn't be able to talk to anybody or see anybody for a while. Sent these messages to Carol's new fiance, Salvatore, and he believed these messages. He just thought that his fiancée had caught COVID and she was self-isolating and there was nothing to worry about. Davide then also pretended to be Carol on her OnlyFans account. Because do you remember the batch of videos that Carol and Davide filmed on the day of the murder? All the videos before the fake request? Well, Davide just started posting all of that content on OnlyFans. And obviously to Carol's family and friends, it just looked like Carol was still working. I mean, she was obviously working from home. She had COVID, but she could still work. And Davide was just there posting all of this content to OnlyFans. And I bet you he was loving everything because he was probably still making all of that money because now he was taking all of it. Davide was also responding to messages from subscribers, pretending to be Carol. Carol also didn't turn up to some of the adult video shoots that she had scheduled. But again, this didn't raise alarm because people in the industry knew that Carol wanted to get out of the industry. So they just assumed, okay, Carol hasn't turned up. It seems like she's gotten herself out. He paid all of Carol's bills, so debt collectors didn't come knocking. He also drove around in her car. He posed as her on Instagram. You can also see Davide was posting on his Instagram at the same time without a care in the world. And Davide pretended to be Carol for weeks and weeks and nobody knew. Because obviously everyone just assumed that she had COVID. Like, she can't come out. No one can see her. But then obviously after a few weeks, it's like, okay, you've clearly recovered from COVID now, or if you haven't, there's something seriously wrong. So which is it? So he had to make up more excuses as to why Carol wasn't around. He now said to all of Carol's friends and family that Carol had gone traveling and that she didn't know when she would return. And I don't know how he was explaining all of this to Carol's 6-year-old son. Did he even have contact with Carol's son? Like, was he pretending to be Carol to her son? Like, was he pretending to be that boy's mom? Now, if he was, that is sick and twisted. That is disgusting. I don't know if he was, but if he was, that is another level of sick. So Davide really truly thought that he was committing the perfect murder because he was keeping everything ticking over. And 2 whole months go by and no one has seen Carol, but no one is suspicious. And I'm assuming right now, but I am assuming that no one is suspicious because if you remember, one of Carol's passions is traveling. So maybe she was the kind of person that would just get up and leave and go traveling. Maybe that is why people weren't suspicious at this point. So 2 whole months have gone by. All of Carol's body parts are still in that deep freezer. But because enough time has passed, Davide thinks that it's safe to remove those body parts now. So he places all of the body parts in his car. He drove to a location and he dumped all of the body parts off a cliff. And Davide thought, that's it. That's the end of this. I've gotten away with the perfect murder. Everyone thinks that Carol is traveling. No one is suspicious and no one has reported her missing. However, thankfully, he was wrong about all of that. And we now finally get to Davide's downfall. Because Davide disposed of Carol's body, he dumped her body parts off the cliff in late March, which was over 2 months after the murder. And he was convinced that no one would find these body parts that he had dumped off the cliff. But literally just a day or 2 later, like pretty much no time at all, someone found the body parts. So a man was walking on the path at the bottom of the cliffs and he saw a load of bags everywhere and it just looked like a load of rubbish. And he got so angry. He was like, why are people dumping their rubbish off of this cliff? Like, why are people littering everywhere? So he went over to investigate and he received the shock of his life because he opened one of the bags and he found human remains. So the police were immediately called and an investigation was opened, but the police had no luck in identifying the remains. They could not match the remains up to anyone on the missing persons database. And remember, at this point, Carol is not even a missing person. So no wonder they can't match up the remains to anyone on that database. The remains were also really hard to identify because the face, Carol's face, was impossible to recognize. That is how brutal her injuries were. So all they had to go on were a number of tattoos on Carol's body. So the police released a press report and pleaded with the public for any information about the remains that they have just found. And they released descriptions of Carol's tattoos. And they didn't hear anything back for a few days. The case was literally going nowhere. But then suddenly, a few days later, a man stumbled across the police report and saw the descriptions of Carol's tattoos. And he immediately recognized them. And how did he recognize these tattoos? Well, he had seen Carol's pornographic content. He was a consumer of her content. Maybe he was even a subscriber on her OnlyFans. But he had watched Carol undressed on many occasions, so he had seen her tattoos many times and he instantly recognized them. And it was actually the tattoo on her inner thigh that was the identifying tattoo, which is just crazy when you think about it. If Carol didn't have those tattoos, would she have ever been identified? So this man has obviously identified Carol, but instead of going to the police, he actually went to a local journalist and gave the journalist all of the details. However, the man didn't know Carol's real name. He only knew her stage name as Charlotte Angie. So the journalist, he didn't go to the police straight away either. He started doing his own research into Charlotte Angie. He wanted to find the real identity of Charlotte Angie and actually see if this tip was legitimate or not. So he started to dig into Charlotte Angie's background just to see what he could find, just anything, you know, and he actually did manage to find her real identity. So Carol Maltese. He managed to track down some of Carol's family members. He got in contact with them and he asked if Carol was okay, like was she around. The family member then provided the journalist with Carol's phone number, saying that he could contact her for himself. I assume this family member knew that Carol had a public profile and she probably just thought that this journalist wanted to do a story on her. So the journalist contacts Carol on WhatsApp. He just messages her and asks how she's doing, and he does get a reply. But who is on the other end? Who is the one actually replying? Well, of course, it's Davide. So Davide, posing as Carol, replies to the journalist and says that everything is fine. But the journalist didn't believe this. So he asks Carol, can you provide a voice message to prove that this is you? And this is when Carol, i.e. Davide, stopped responding. Now, this was warning bells to the journalist because they were like, why would Carol all of a sudden stop replying? This is just so suspicious. Maybe that's not even Carol that I'm talking to. Maybe it's someone pretending to be her. And the only person that would ever pretend to be Carol is someone that could have possibly killed her. So this is when the journalist then went to the police with everything that they had found. And the police immediately started digging into all of this. So the police tracked down Carol's fiancé, Salvatore, and he immediately becomes suspect number one. They drag Salvatore in for an interview, but he started crying. He said that it couldn't possibly be true that Carol was dead. He said that she had first been isolating with COVID and now she was traveling, like she was alive. Salvatore told the police all about Davide, and clearly Salvatore told the police that Carol had been self-isolating at Davide's home. He told the police that Carol had been living with Davide, that Davide also confirmed all of this story about the COVID and traveling, and he had told Salvatore this whole time that Carol was fine and well. And the police believe Salvatore. He is no longer a suspect. Now the police turn their attention to Davide. So they bring Davide in for questioning, and this is when everything would start to unravel. Because as soon as Davide is brought in for an interview, he clearly realizes that he is trapped. He realizes that the police are onto him, and he tries to worm his way out of all of this. He starts coming up with so many different stories. He started to say that it was a sex game, role play gone wrong. He said that he was hitting Carol with a hammer. He was meant to do that, but he was only hitting her gently. And then all of a sudden she started getting really serious injuries from being gently hit with a hammer. He then said that he slit Carol's throat because he could see that she was in pain. And I'm just like, what? That is ridiculous. Does he truly think that the police are going to buy that? He said that he wanted to put Carol out of her misery. He was trying to make out that it was all an accident, none of it was premeditated, which was clearly a load of BS. And I truly don't know how he thought he was going to worm his way out of this, because it didn't take the police long to find the fake profile that Davide had created on OnlyFans that had requested the torture video. They also found the videos on Davide's iPhone from the content that Carol and Davide had filmed that day. However, the actual murder video was nowhere to be seen because obviously Davide had deleted the footage. The police tried to recover it, and it's not actually clear in what has been reported on whether they were successful in that or not. However, the police knew that Davide was guilty. There was so much evidence. Even if they didn't find the actual murder video, the police concluded that Davide had carried out this brutal murder because he was insanely possessive and jealous of Carol, the fact that she had moved on, the fact that she was now in a different relationship, and the fact that she was moving away from him to be close to her son so they could no longer work together. So the police charged Davide with murder. So then a year later, in June of 2023, the trial finally happened. Davide pleaded not guilty. He was still claiming this whole thing was an accident, but the jury were having none of it. I mean, there was so much evidence. And in the end, Davide was found guilty and he was sentenced to 30 years in prison. However, Carol's family were not happy about this. They believed that this sentence was far too short for what Davide had actually done. They believed that there was prejudice from the judge during the trial. They believed that Carol had been unfairly treated because she was a sex worker, almost as if she had put herself in this position and asked to be murdered. So in the end, a resentencing took place and Davide's sentence was changed and he was now sentenced to life in prison, which is clearly what he deserved in the first place. And this case was just truly horrific. The way that Davide went about everything just because he was jealous and possessive and controlling. And I don't know what he was more angry about. Was he more angry about the fact that Carol had moved on and was in a new relationship? Or was he more angry that she was no longer going to be working with him and she was moving away and then Davide wouldn't be able to make any more money? Because if you want my opinion, I think it was the latter. I think Davide was solely focused on money and how much he could make out of Carol. And she took that away from him, even though it was her doing most of the work to begin with. So he probably shouldn't have even been getting as large a cut as he was. But now I want to end this video remembering the victim of today's case. Carol Maltese was known as a kind, sweet and caring person. She loved to travel, loved having fun, but most of all, she loved her son more than anything. She was trying to provide a better future for herself and for her son, but this was all taken away from her far, far too soon. She was just 26 years old. And my heart truly goes out to Carol's family, but also her son, who now has to grow up without their mother. He has to grow up knowing what that monster did, the fact that that monster took his mom away. And I just wish him and all of Carol's family the very best. So as always, let me know your thoughts, theories and opinions on today's case, and don't forget to leave me your case suggestions in the comments down below because I always want to know what you want to hear next. Thank you again to Cookie Jam for sponsoring today's video, and I'll see you all in my next one. Bye.